Okay, so hello and welcome to Blueprint Cymru, a podcast bringing ideas, experience and ambition to the conversation of building a better future for Wales. My name is Simon Hobson. In today's episode, I'm joined by Brendan Roberts. Brendan is a dedicated community councillor in Torfaen. He has worked in the civil service, local government officer and third sector professional. He is through this work and his activism that Brendan brings a deep understanding to the challenges and opportunities facing Welsh communities. When the Welsh Government held its Radical Reform Summit in 2022, Brendan drew upon his own life experiences, particularly in the child social service system in Wales, to be at the forefront of contributors to the event's declaration, which took forward Wales's already groundbreaking acts protecting children and young adults from mistreatment and violence. More recently, Brendan has become an approved parliamentary candidate for the Liberal Democrats, and he hopes that standing for the election to the Senedd, if elected, would bring him an opportunity to continue his commitment to the community work, championing progressive change and empowering people in Wales. Hello and welcome, Brendan.
Thank you.
So perhaps you could tell people a little bit about where you originate from and a little bit about your childhood.
Yeah, sure. Where should I start? So I have quite a unique history in terms of Cymru or Wales. So I'm actually half English, half Welsh. I was born in the lovely rolling hills of Devon, the southwest country, and then moved to Wales when I was about 6 months old due to my father's family living here. So I'm Welsh on my father's side, and I've practically grown up in Torfaen all my life, in the South Wales East Valleys, of course. So, yeah, going on from there, of course, it's been a journey of just going to school in Torfaen and then working in Torfaen, and of course hoping to represent Torfaen in the Senedd and Monmouthshire, because of course we now have the paired constituency, so I do need to remember that.
So I mentioned in the introduction a bit about your experiences of child social services and the care sector. Are you able to tell the listeners a little bit more about that, your personal experiences of that?
I can. I mean, just looking at some of the questions, I think in terms of what the system has got wrong for me, or what it did get wrong for me, I think one of the things I've always brought up about the care system in Wales, or the care system in general in the UK, is that we have a problem with early intervention and prevention, no less. So, you know, we have families on the brink, of collapse, and therefore are very close to falling apart because that intervention is not there, or the prevention is not there. And those families could be falling apart for many different reasons. Maybe just one child is too much, or there may be drug and alcohol issues, or there may be financial issues even. Those are the kind of things that do crop up. And instead of intervening as quick as we can, what we see is social services stepping in when it's basically become too late, and unfortunately children need to go into care. And Wales, funnily enough, in Torfaen, has seen exponential levels of children in care and care leavers. At the moment, the population of care leavers, or children in care and care leavers, is nearing about 8,000. And Torfaen actually had the highest amount of care leavers per head of the population in England and Wales. And that is kind of staggering, and kind of one of the reasons, I guess, perhaps why I got into politics, because I'm just, it sort of feeds a frustration as a care leaver myself, is I don't want to see any more kids have to grow up in that system if we can avoid it, if we can get in that early intervention, that prevention. But more importantly, if that does happen, it's a case of making sure that the system is better. in terms of resources, I think. For example, what we are now seeing is the eradication of profit from the care system. That has been quite the debate here in Wales. If we're talking in terms of political will and political parties, it's now coming ahead. It's now going forward, but there has been slow traction. But
why has that been so controversial? Because it would seem whatever is best for children and children going forward. I know one of the things that you looked at within the summit that you were involved with was making sure that children that do get taken into care are kept in their communities, because that's obviously important to then reunite families as and when, if families are able to take the child back. So why would it be controversial to take profit out of that system?
Exactly. I mean, yeah, you know, it's a no-brainer for most people, but if you ask the Conservatives that question, let's just say they're not particularly amicable to the idea, or they understand it in principle, but they still feel that the private sector should have some stake. And I'm very adamant, as are many other young care leavers and third sector organisations and politicians from other political parties. It's a no-go. You just don't profit off children and young people. They are not a business prospect. They are not a commodity. These are real human lives that deserve to be treated with dignity and respect, and not be sold to the highest bidder and then have about a quarter of the money spent on them then going into the pockets of shareholders, because that is what has been realistically happening. And it's very uncommon in the rest of the world. We don't see it in Europe, for example. So we need to be ahead of the game, and we need to roll it out as quick as possible. And thankfully, we are seeing that local authorities, if they have a business plan to give to the Welsh Government, the Welsh Government are happy to give the local authorities to really invest in those new children's homes that will be run not for profit.
So that legislation is fairly new. Where does that leave children as of today?
It's a journey. So it won't be a quick fix. And I think most of us in the care system, most professionals understand that it will not be a quick fix. But what we do understand is that we are taking a journey to a better tomorrow, so to speak. You know, we're taking that further step. We are attempting to give hope to children in care and care leavers, those old and those new, to show that finally we are listening, and finally something is going to be done about this. So where it leaves us, I guess, is better policy, hopefully, and policy that will make the lives of future children in care and future care leavers much better off, and they will get the services that, you know, children in care finally deserve.
So the Senedd, the Welsh Parliament, is a very progressive legislative organisation. The body of individuals there seem to have put forward and enacted a number of very forward-thinking acts on mental health, Future Generations Act. There's been support for payment for nurses, the one we've just spoken about. Very many items which have led the United Kingdom, if not the world. One of the things that I wonder how you would tackle is, it seems that when it comes to implementing these innovative acts, it can often be quite timid in the way that it puts them into place. And what's your view on why that is? What's holding back the Senedd from implementing these acts as maybe as quickly as they need to be put into place?
That is a very good question, and I can think of two potential reasons. The first I'll give is, it's a biggie and it always comes up, and I think most people are going to know where I'm going to go with this. It's money, it's funding, it's always resources. So in terms of eradicating profit, for example, from the care system, that's going to be a lot of work. Local authorities needing money to create their own children's homes or turn old buildings into not-for-profit children's homes. The money is there, or it's coming through. But what the Welsh Government need is faith that the local government or local authorities, the 22 local authorities, will actually do what they say. So what the local authorities need to do is come up with business plans to then submit to the Welsh Government, to then give them faith that they can, the Welsh Government can then give them money. So that, of course, takes time. And whilst I see the merit in that, because I think it's important to be fiscally responsible and make sure that money is being spent, you know, it's taxpayers' money at the end of the day. It has to be spent responsibly and efficiently. Sometimes I think it can just be a frustration, you know, bureaucracy, red tape, and time processes, especially if you're an impatient person, which if you're anything like me, you can get really pent up about it. But so long as the work is being done, I think that's the more important thing for me. Is yes, things take time, but so long as we're seeing some progress. Funnily enough, in Torfaen, we're seeing that progress. We've seen some children's homes have already been created. So the money's coming through, but yeah, it will take time. And I think, so the money is one. And then it comes back down to local authorities again. So in Wales, we now have a corporate parenting charter. That's basically a charter that aligns all public service bodies and basically outlines what they will do to improve the lives of children in care and care leavers. This is where my frustration really kicked in, because we anticipated that all 22 local authorities would sign up to it quite quickly. There were about 3 or 4 left that didn't. We were a year in to the corporate parenting.
What was their reasoning behind not signing in?
It, quote unquote, needed to go through the political process, and by that it needed to be voted at full council. And I did think personally that was a pithy excuse. It doesn't take a year to sign off something as important as the corporate parenting charter. I mean, local authorities are already corporate parents. They know their responsibilities. I think they already know what they can and can't do for children in care and care leavers. So why on earth it took a year for about 3 or 4 of them to sign up to the corporate parenting charter is beggars belief. There's nothing really that warrants that, or there's nothing really I could say to justify it. So sometimes it really is a case of political will, funding, and just doing things quickly. It's, you know, I'm not saying politicians should, or government officers or whatnot, should throw things out with the bathwater, but at least be a bit more delicate and understand that some things are time sensitive and these kind of things are important, and we do have to be subtly quick about getting on with the job at hand.
Well, particularly when you're dealing with children's lives.
Yeah.
But just to go back to one of the points you brought up there about local authorities putting in individual business plans to obtain the cash to put these into place. Does that allow for local authorities to structure a plan and a business, interpret the legislation to suit their community?
I would say so, yes. I think that is kind of the benefit there is, of course, the 22 different local authorities represent very different areas in terms of geography. Torfaen, I'm going to keep bringing up Torfaen because it's probably the best stomping ground in terms of care leavers and this legislation. It's a more urban area, so we're probably in a better position to deliver this more quickly. If you go over to Ceredigion, though, very rural, very big local authority. So it allows the business case, or allowing the local authorities to send in their own each individual business case. It does allow them to tailor the case to their own local needs, so long as it fits within the legislation and so long as they're doing everything by the book. I guess there's no skin off anybody's nose. I mean, so long as the Welsh Government are content that like a place like Ceredigion can get the ball rolling.
I wanted to move on to having a bit of a chat about policing and judiciary.
Cool.
So unlike Scotland, Northern Ireland, and obviously Wales, does not have its own policing, courts, judiciary. That all has to be reported to the UK Home Office, UK Ministry of Justice. So how does the Senedd make its decisions felt, particularly maybe more aggressive acts that might need policing to enforce them, say? Also interpretation of the acts, which might be better sought if a judge is trained specifically in Wales on Welsh laws, whereas at the moment judges are often brought in from England and they are England-Wales trained, so they might not be fully familiar with acts and laws that Senedd have brought in. They're therefore often fudging the laws that the Senedd have created in order to fit in with those English-Welsh court systems. So I guess my question to you is, how do the citizens of Wales benefit from the Senedd and all these progressive acts when England still retains the legal jurisdiction over Wales?
That is a can of worms right there.
It might be, yes. But I think the reason I asked this question, Brendan, is because all the political parties discuss it and have discussed it in their previous manifestos for the general election in 2024, but very few seem to actually be bringing it to the fore on a regular basis in the context of it's, everyone agrees now, apart from the few exceptions, that the Senedd is here, it's doing its thing, it's here to stay. Everyone agrees that with a few exceptions that yes, it doesn't really make sense that Wales doesn't have rights over its judiciary, but nobody seems to be bringing this up on a daily basis, really pushing it forward in the Senedd. Welsh MPs in Westminster don't seem to be pushing it quite as much as perhaps they should if they really believe this should change.
Well, I first would say, and I shamelessly plug, I think that's why we need to elect people like me into the Senedd in next year, so people like me can start pushing for it. But you're right, it's not being pushed. We all agree, as you rightly say, we all agree on the fact that policing, crime and policing, and the judiciary system needs to be devolved. My observation in terms of that is the Welsh parties all seem to be pretty much agreed on this. But we obviously have a very difficult or very intricate political party system. Of course, we have my party, just to start with, we have the federalised system. The UK Lib Dems, or the federal Lib Dems, seem to be quite on board with us on this. However, if we go to Labour, they are really holding back. And one of the biggest frustrations for me, or has been consistently since the general election, was this rhetoric about we have two Labour governments at either ends of the M4 working together. It's a load of nonsense. It's codswallop to me, because that's not what we're seeing. Welsh Labour have called for the devolution of crime and policing. UK Labour don't want to know. They don't want to touch it with a barge pole. They've teetered on the edges and say, oh, we may devolve, youth justice. It's not good enough. Even the Conservatives at this point seem more progressive on this matter. They didn't do it, of course, which is incredibly frustrating, which is why I'm a Lib Dem, because I don't particularly like the two-party politics that we have here in the UK. The two-party politics is It's dying off, as far as I'm concerned. So it is being pushed, but it's only being pushed internally, I think, and we're not making a massive loud noise. We're not seeing that from mainstream politicians, and this is what we are seeing is more push for devolution on Wales infrastructure, because of course, as you will know, Simon, we've had a lot of problems with HS2 and the reclassification of that, and the reclassification of Cambridge and Oxford. We've had a very low settlement. We are not getting the justice we deserve on that front.
But you don't, sorry to interrupt you, but you don't see, going back to the judiciary, you don't hear a lot of conversation amongst the general public. And I wonder, I mean, it might be a dry subject for the general public, but it's obviously incredibly important, because it is the law that governs your daily lives.
It is important.
And who actually decides on that. So that, to me, the fact that the general public are not having that conversation, maybe not thinking about it, you know, on a regular level, is a failure of the politicians to not bring it up. And it makes me wonder, you know, it's great to have these lawmaking powers in the Senedd, but if they can't be guided and put through a Welsh specific judiciary with Welsh specific police enforcing it, then is that not just a symbolic building with symbolic elected individuals in it, in the Senedd?
It can certainly feel symbolic at times. I don't think it's entirely inept, but it's not foolproof. The system is, it has a lot of imperfections and a lot of flaws. I mean, I could actually link this to my work with care experience young people. The justice system clearly doesn't work for them. And Wales does have very different needs in terms of practically everything, you know, probably in terms of drug and alcohol use, probably in terms of homelessness, probably in terms of just everyday life. So yeah, going back to your point, it just does seem a bit futile, I think, for those of us here in Wales, that basically our laws and our acts and whatnot can't really be fully respected, or that we can't pursue justice to the full extent of the law if we don't actually have our own law system.
So going forward, still on this topic, but going forward and thinking about post next May 2026, after the Senedd elections, currently the polling is projecting it won't be Labour as a government, so whomever it is. And then thinking about, since the 26 years since the Senedd has been in place, when Welsh Assembly as was, you've mentioned the two-party system, Labour Conservative. It's always been Labour Conservative in Westminster. It's always been Labour in Cardiff Bay.
Yeah.
Do you think that whomever becomes the next government in Wales will be more assertive in pushing for these? Because from what you're saying to me, it sounds like that Labour have been comfortable in their position, comfortable in holding their places of power.
They've been very complacent.
And well, that's the word, I guess. So is your hope for reshaping this and for it actually to go forward, that whomever is the next government in Wales will be more assertive with London and will, you know, not take no for an answer?
No, without a shadow of a doubt. I think if we're talking in terms of political party, I mean, you and I both know it's either going to be Plaid or Reform that are going to try to seek to form a government. Obviously, Plaid are going to make the case very strongly for that, and more. Reform UK is a totally different ball game. However, what I have noticed is that they do care about community empowerment. They do care about devolving power as local as possible. So I'm not really sure what to expect from them. They could surprise us, and they could call for the same thing. I'd like to think they would. I'd like to think they respect the people of Wales enough to do that. But from looking at those two political parties, they're certainly not shy. I can certainly guarantee that regardless of which one does get a chance of power, they're certainly going to be more assertive than Labour ever has been in the 26 years it's been in power here.
So I'd like to have a little bit of a conversation about your work in the community council. And, you know, have you, I guess, continuing the theme of maybe being a bit toothless in what they can achieve, but have you found that your work has been hampered, or have you achieved things that beyond what you'd hoped was realistic?
I think being on Hentless Community Council, it's a very small community. It's only 2,500 people. And I've only been there since October, but since that time, I have been truly impressed at just how remarkable of a community they are. In terms of achieving things, I do make the point that sometimes I think people don't realise what community councils can actually do, because they're focused obviously on the county councils, and I don't blame them for that. You know, community councils, they're small, but they're mighty. That's how I like to look at it. There's only 7 of us on my community council, and I'm the only Lib Dem, so I'm sort of weirdly a tiebreaker out of 3 independents and 3 Labour. That's if you can have tie breaks on a community council, because it's not very party political. But nonetheless, I remember my first meeting, and Torfaen Community Transport were looking for somebody to sit on their committee. Transport is something that I've worked on, of course, and have quite a bit of experience in. So I, of course, put my name forward, and they were looking for grant funding. And we gave them a lifeline. We gave them £250, which I know in the grand scheme of things doesn't seem like a lot. But for an organisation like Torfaen Community Transport, a lot of it's voluntary. So that £250 could be very useful in terms of even just administration costs. And I found out a little bit later on from other community councillors and reports that we were the only community council to actually give them any grant funding when they requested it. So that made me feel a little bit better, actually, that Hentless was putting its head above the parapet, and, you know, it was only £250, but it was still money that nobody else was giving out to them. We've had issues with, funnily enough, coming back to crime and justice, we've had issues with crime in the area, burglary, theft. We've unfortunately had a young person even held at knife point. You know, that was quite a shocking moment that infuriated quite a few locals, and no less community councillors like myself. But the aftermath of that was even more inspiring, because the community has come together, and we now have a very big local neighbourhood watch, which is made up of about 150 members. We teamed up with the next council ward over, and now we have a community neighbourhood watch. It's run by, I think, about 20 volunteers. So, and the community council helped facilitate that. We're giving them funding. So that for me is really inspiring, and that really gives me hope that, you know, community councils, we're not just there in the background, you know, doing nothing. We are actually sometimes more on the ground than county councils. That neighbourhood watch is a perfect example. We're trying to facilitate things like that to keep the community safe. So I'm really proud, actually, that I've started out my political career, so to speak, as a community councillor, and I, of course, will be there now until 2027 when the next elections come up. I came into being a community councillor straight after the general election. You had the general election in May, then my community council election was actually a by-election, so it was all pretty hands-on last year. Yeah, very, very interesting.
And you mentioned there about transport and your interest and experience in that. Have you got particular vision on how the transport system should be working or could work in Wales?
You know full well I do. Yes, I think bus franchising, for example, here in Wales, it's not foolproof. I like the idea. I like the legislation in principle. It's not bad, but I think there are real flaws in that. And I've written articles already, or I've written an article for Nation Cymru, and have another one I think soon about to come out about supporting the small and medium enterprise bus operators and municipal operators as well, because here in Wales we still do have 2 council operators, Newport and Cardiff, and I am genuinely worried, as are they, funnily enough, the bus operators and the Confederation for Passenger Transport. All these professional bodies and the bus operators and now myself are all saying, you need to rework this, you need to go back to the drawing board. And I made clear in my article, for example, that Ken Skates, the Transport Secretary here in Wales, is just almost riding roughshod over bus operators, not really listening to them, not really engaging. What I've recommended is that we have, now I'm saying that we should have a system where we work almost like the railways here in the UK. So the railways are franchised. So companies have to bid for franchised routes. But we also have a very unique system where we have open access routes. So a railway company, if there is demand, if there's a gap in the system, they can bid to the government to run a rail route, which is what we have with Lumo. They're a cheap train company and they run alongside LNER, which is government run, all the way from London to Edinburgh. So it gives people more choice. And it's cheaper than going on LNER. So it's filling in a service gap. It's still allowing that. It's still allowing for competition, but it's still regulated. And what I'm trying to say to the Welsh Government is we can have the best of both worlds. It can work. You can have regulated bus services. You can have integrated ticketing and all that. But you can also support business as well and open it up to open access bus routes. So if a small independent bus operator notices a gap in their local community that isn't covered by franchising, they should be able to apply to run an open access route. The thing with that, though, is they take on the full commercial risk, the full financial risk. So it's sort of a safeguard, I guess, for everyone. The bus company takes on the risk. The Welsh Government don't have to worry about bailing them out if necessary. There will be winners and losers in that system. There's always winners and losers in every system, but with allowing open access operators, it would expand the bus system and allow for more innovation, which is what the bus system desperately and sorely needs here in Wales, because it is broken. Franchising is not the be all and end all, and I will keep making the case for that until I see a change.
Thanks. Let's have a little chat about the Liberal Democrats and your involvement with the Lib Dems. So Liberal Democrats across the United Kingdom, you've already mentioned that as a party, they see themselves and structure themselves within an internal federal system. So Wales and Scotland are treated differently as far as they've got more autonomy than the federal system, which sort of governs England. But overall, the general voter doesn't really understand that, don't really know that. They see it as the Liberal Democrats. The Liberal Democrats position themselves, particularly for the Westminster elections, very much as a sort of insurgent centrist party that are wanting to challenge Westminster. I put it to you that maybe that is a little bit muddled now, given that they're clearly, and have been very open about filling the void that is being left by the Conservative Party in England. we've also got history of the Liberal Democrats, where they went into coalition with the Conservatives in 2010, and a long-standing policy for Liberal Democrats is to change first past the post to proportional system. There was the fudged AV vote, alternative vote referendum, which was a compromise, which actually, if it had gone through, would have put the Conservatives into a stronger position. Then we also see the long-stated objection of the Liberal Democrats to federalise the United Kingdom. I guess my question is 2 or 3 points. Is one, why, when given the opportunity, was that not pushed harder by those in Liberal Democrats in government in the 2010-2015 government? 2, has the time not been and gone when people would have accepted federalised structure? And 2, isn't Wales always going to become the worst off of the partners, even in a federalised system, just because of its size? You know, it's 3 million. It was Scotland's just a bit over 5 million.
Yeah.
The rest is England. So England is surely, even in a federalised system, always going to get its own way.
There is a lot to unpack there, politely meaning that. So I will start with the coalition, actually, in terms of the 3 points you've raised. PR. I think between 2010 and 2015, so you probably don't know this, but I actually take a lot of interest in the coalition years. I've tried to study a lot about it and what happened there. I've read Nick Clegg's book. I've read David Lord's book, Coalition. It really interests me, the whole dynamics of what happened there. And I think before we get into anything, I think we first need to understand that it was perhaps a marriage of convenience. If we had went with Labour, I think we would have struggled even with some of the things you've already raised. But if we had went with Labour, we would have had to clamber together other political parties, and it would have been a coalition of chaos, I think. You know, 5, 6, 7 different parties all trying to pull together policies and ideas, and it probably would have broken at some point. The Lib Dems and the Conservatives, is it sort of the option I would go for? No, because I'm considered a social liberal. I'm more aligned to the centre-left. But I think some things worthwhile came out of the coalition. Not many, but some things. In terms of PR, I think that was catch-22. I think we have to realise that the Conservatives have always been very particular about proportional representation, although weirdly they did want open lists here in Wales alongside the Liberal Democrats, which I found very surprising, but we can come back to that. But in 2010 they made it very clear that first past the post was all they were going to support, so I'm very surprised they even gave in to us on a referendum for AV, which of course likely isn't PR, it's just a warmer version of first past the post, if you can call it that. And then going on to federalism. Again, I think the Conservatives wouldn't touch that with a barge pole. But what we did fight for in 2011, you may or may not know, was more powers over tax and other powers. And we got a referendum on that, and the people of Wales voted for that. So the Welsh Liberal Democrats have always been on the side of devolution. We proved that in the coalition, and we want to see a hell of a lot more powers come to Wales as soon as possible. Unfortunately, when you're the smaller party, a junior in a coalition, I think you're always going to be coming up against backlash and flack and, you know, people trying to put you down. So, yeah. In terms of acceptance of federalism, going to that point, I think it's not so much people can't accept federalism. It's, I think they have a problem understanding it. And I'm not saying people are uneducated or anything like that. I just think it's a very tough system to explain because, and also there are different types of federalism in Germany, the US. It's very intricate, and I think for the UK it would be even a hell of a lot more intricate. So,
but it's not an untested, untried model, is it? You've got
no.
Belgium, which would probably maybe mirror
Well,
the United Kingdom.
Belgium is the model I personally like. Between you and me, I trying to study the different types of federal systems because we need to try and explain it better to people. But to go to your point about Wales being at the bottom of the pile, so to speak, I think it depends on how the system would be designed. If England was just one big federal state, then of course Wales would be homogenized. We'd be completely overlooked, completely forgotten, ignored. No different to how we are now, basically. But if England was divided into regions, perhaps, Southwest England, Southeast England, and had the same sort of status as, they all had the same sort of status as Wales, or the same sort of devolved powers, then we might see some equality. But nobody's really talking about this. This is another thing nobody's really talking about.
That was going to be my follow-up on your point. I can see the intellectual merits of what you're saying, but there's absolutely no conversation, seems to be absolutely no desire within Westminster to even entertain thinking about it, let alone bringing any of this into action. So given
my only rebuttal to that, I think, with the Labour government is these new metro mayors and whatnot. They seem very intent on devolution, just maybe to you and me, not in the right way. It all seems very centralized still. It's the centralization of power under the cloak and dagger disguise of devolution. So
which Brendan, I think, could be argued is the status of the Senedd.
Yes,
it's been said that incremental devolution is a sensible way of going about things, but actually, many point, and I think the 26 years of devolution for Wales have started to show this, and not, there's many recent cases, Rails, Crown Estate, the recent financial settlement, that this just keeps Wales in perpetual adolescence, as it were, politically. So given that Conservatives, Labour, Reform, UK, they're all taking a stance, seemingly, that unlike Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales isn't capable of managing its own finances, its judicial systems we've already discussed, Crown Estates, its own energy projects. We see this Labour government, proposing putting energy regions which would divide Wales into parts of northwest England and southwest of England as well. So that would take away the territorial integrity of Wales itself.
I do find it ironic that the political parties in England, or the mainstream reform Labour, Conservative, have the unmitigated goal, perhaps, to say that Wales is incapable of running its own affairs. I don't think Wales is incapable of running its own affairs. I think Labour is incapable of running Wales's affairs, because for the 26 years it's had free rein to do so, and I think they've been in power too long that we are now seeing more cracks in the system than we ever wanted to see. Wales is not incapable. We've, regardless of how much Labour have messed it up, we have done some pretty good things. I mean, going back to the legislation now on eradicating profit from the care of looked after children, I'm not seeing that in England. Scotland also did it, but they botched it up because private sector companies were still able to take profit. They just did it. They did it through the back door. So Wales is learning lessons from Scotland and is therefore designing a system better than Scotland. So if anything, if given the opportunity, if given the chance, Wales can do a hell of a lot better sometimes than its counterparts in England and Scotland and Northern Ireland. But we need to be trusted to do that. Westminster needs to have faith in us to do that.
So from that statement, do you support full fiscal autonomy to Wales? So,
depends what you mean by full fiscal autonomy.
or do you believe that Wales should have an ability to tax and spend as it sees fit, change the tax bands, borrow money?
Oh yeah, without a shadow of a doubt. Yes, I've actually been quite perhaps a bit more progressive in my party on this matter. I've been calling for this. I've been quite an advocate for it, changing the tax bands, maybe even going so far as to giving us, well, I have actually written policy on it, and it is now party policy, only just it passed this year, about giving us any gross revenue from VAT receipts, which is what, funnily enough, Scotland get. Given us more powers over social security benefits, which is what Scotland has. It's really frustrating, because there is nothing stopping us from having the same powers as Scotland. We already know how to tax and spend. Well, the Welsh Government as an institution does. I'm not so sure Welsh Labour does, but that's a whole other debate. But we don't have this incapability of taxing people and spending their revenue. We have the capabilities to do that. We're just asking for those few more powers that Scotland have, so that we can provide better services for the people of Wales, like social security. Social security in Scotland is much better because they're able to implement their own benefits. For example, they have implemented a child payment, which has been called for by myself. It's been called for by the Liberal Democrats. Now it's now policy, looking into schemes like that if we were to have social security devolved. It's been called by Plaid Cymru, and it's been mentioned by other mainstream politicians, because, as you know, child poverty, 1 in 3 children live in poverty here in Wales. It's a staggering amount, and yet we can barely do anything about it within our remit currently.
So where do you stand on Wales? I've spoken to a number of individuals that are part of Plaid Cymru, and obviously they advocate for full independence of Wales from the United Kingdom. Where do you stand with regards to Wales running its own affairs outside of the United Kingdom?
I think I will speak for my party and then myself. My party obviously believes in federalism, and so do I, more or less. I think federalism would be preferable. But in a liberal democracy, and nonetheless Liberal Democrats is quite literally in our name, we respect the freedom of choice, and we respect empowering people to the best of our ability or their ability. And we have to respect democracy. And if there is enough demand, if there is enough of a mandate to hold a referendum on Welsh independence, then I do not think that should really ever be ignored. I think we have to listen to those calls, even if we disagree with it, regardless of which political party. You could be a Conservative or Reform UK. But if a significant amount of Welsh people are saying we want a referendum, then who are we to ignore that? Who are we to say you can't have one? And I just do not think, and I've always held this view, I do not think the choice of Wales's constitutional future, where it goes next, should be in the hands of a small minority of politicians. It should be in the hands of the people of Wales, the 3 million odd people that live here in Wales. It's in their hands. We should give them the ability to choose their own future, and I wholeheartedly trust them to do that.
So if that day was to come and a referendum on the subject of Wales leaving the United Kingdom was there. Would you extend that vote to, because there's also 3 million Welsh diaspora like myself, would you extend that vote to the Welsh diaspora as well, or would people have to live in Wales?
That's a good question. I haven't really considered it. It's quite an intricate question. I think it's something to be considered. I think if you have Welsh citizenship, or you have UK citizenship, and there's a whole plethora of questions layered into that. The Welsh diaspora being able to vote in said referendum if it were to occur.
Yeah, perhaps it's one that needs deeper and more
deep
years
investigation. Yeah, others may feel not so open to it. If it's an ironic one, because we don't have separate citizenship here in the UK. If it said on your passport, for example, that you were a Welsh citizen, yeah, by all means, that's fine. You can vote in the referendum. But because we're a part of a United Kingdom, that's when it starts to become a bit more intricate.
Do you think that's something that hasn't been explored that could be, if you were to go down the road of federalising United Kingdom, Wales to be a federal state or federal nation country in the United Kingdom? Do you have an opinion? Obviously, it's putting you on the spot with regards to having, Welsh, or I'm a Welsh citizen, part of the United Kingdom in your passport?
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I know Quebec has that, right?
No, Canada, under the Canadian system, everybody's Canadian. They each hold a Canadian passport, which does upset a lot of Quebecers.
I'm sure it does. There is a lot. You're asking me questions that maybe need a whole load of investigating. But honestly, I think it's an odd one. I think there's so much to explore in terms of how the UK would do federalism. I mean, in Belgium, in Germany, and the USA. The USA is probably a better example, because if you're an American, you just have an American passport. But some people may want, I don't know, a Californian passport, because maybe
people are very proud of their state in the US.
Yes. Yeah. Funnily enough, I work in the Hilton here in Cardiff at the moment, and I got talking to a Californian, and they were exceptionally proud of being a Californian. So, yeah, I think it's certainly a quite a deep conversation to have, and I think a lot of Welsh people would probably welcome it, having their own, Welsh passport with a nice dragon on, maybe.
What role do you think that people under 30 like yourself should be playing in shaping Wales's future, constitutionally and obviously importantly economically? I've spoken a lot in these podcasts with individuals that have highlighted there are a great number of talented individuals brought up in Wales, a lot of people that are entrepreneurial and want to make businesses work, but often they end up going to London or further afield because they feel there aren't the opportunities, or there isn't the support, both financially and infrastructure wise. So how does an entrepreneur or an aspiring young person such as yourself that wants to change politics and communities find a reason to stay in Wales?
Between you and me, even I have trouble with that at times. I am insanely proud to have Welsh heritage and to have lived in Torfaen all my life. Cymru is a wonderful town. It's a very welcoming town, I find. But there have been times when I've thought about going back to the southwest and working there, because even in the southwest, the economy is sometimes better. The wages are sometimes better. Yes, the house prices are significantly higher, but you do pay for what you get. It's considering the environment. I think, though, for me, whenever I am out of the country, out of Wales, makes it sound like I'm going to makes it sound like Wales is already independent. But when I am over the border, and even when I'm in the southwest visiting family, I get what we call, of course, hiraeth. I do just long for home. I miss Wales. I grew up here. I know the people here, and I think when you're a very small nation of only 3 million people, it is a small world. It's quite funny how you'll just talk to people in the street or in the pub, and they'll ask, do you know such and such? And you can actually say, yes, I do. And that in itself is just lovely. So sometimes I think we are so quick to focus on climbing the ladder in terms of career and jobs and whatnot. And I do understand that. I totally get that. And I want Wales to be open to business. And I want Wales to be open to creating more jobs and having better economic growth. But Wales, for me, sometimes it is about those communities and about sticking together. The community council I'm on, Hentless, clearly showed that when they came together to set up that neighbourhood watch. They all care about their community. They all want it to be safe. They all, get together. We've got our village fete coming up actually in 2 weeks' time. So yeah, Wales is a nation of community building, and that's one of the reasons I stay.
So we're getting to the end of the conversation now, but I wondered, with the final couple of questions, what gives you hope about the direction of Wales?
I think it's all this reform, not Reform UK, anything bar that, but all the reform of the Senedd is quite interesting. The new voting system, the expansion of the seats in the Senedd, and I think it's going to be very interesting. If, for example, if we see applied government, I'm obviously not Plaid Cymru, but as we talked earlier, if they are certainly going to have the opportunity to form a government, I have no doubt in my mind that they're going to be very assertive. And Wales, hopefully, I pray, might just see the economic justice that it deserves, the social justice that it deserves. It gets those devolved powers. It gets the enhanced funding that it rightly deserves in terms of rail infrastructure. And Wales is all the better for it.
Finally, where do you envision Wales being in 15, 20 years from now? What's your hope for the nation?
Okay. I haven't even thought about where I'm going to be in 15, 20 years. I think Wales is going to be personally much stronger. I think we are going to be able to have more of a say in our political system, in terms of economics. I certainly think there will be more of an opportunity there. I hope, for example, I hope in the next 5 to 10 years, at least, we will see the change in the tax system so that Wales can design a tax system for its residents, because wages, of course, are lower here, and we have to take into account for that. So yeah, Wales, I guess, having the more powers to provide better public services and provide better economic outcomes for its citizens.
Diolch yn fawr, Brendan Roberts. So if you enjoyed this conversation, have comments to add, or would like to participate in any future episode of Blueprint Cymru, head over to the New Wales website, which is new.wales.